The night sky shimmered as if a veil had been drawn back, and through that rift came the fleets of the galactic armies. They arrived without announcement, a vast constellation of steel and fire stretching across orbit. Thousands of ships aligned with clinical precision, their engines whispering of worlds already conquered and peoples already forgotten. For the commanders of the coalition, Earth was not a question to be debated, but a resource to be claimed, a primitive sphere populated by bipeds clever enough to shape stone and fire, but not enough to pose a threat. In their eyes, the planet was a garden without predators. Commander Vakul, grizzled from decades of service, stood at the viewport of his flagship, his dark eyes drinking in the blue-white marble below. His voice was calm, though laced with disdain. Atmosphere unguarded. Communication webs fragmented. Technology barely above tribal stages. They are nothing but clever vermin. His adjutant shifted uneasily, talons clicking against the deck. Yet vermin spread quickly. Commander, should we not? Vakul silenced him with a glance. Deploy scouts. We will confirm what we already know. His certainty radiated like iron. To him, war was a matter of mathematics, firepower, numbers, strategy. Nothing on Earth could alter the equation. Far below, Captain Elena Ward trudged through the humidity of the Amazon rainforest, boots sinking into damp soil. Her squad of 6 had been dispatched on what was supposed to be routine reconnaissance after a string of signal disruptions cut through military channels. She had imagined smugglers, or perhaps an experimental satellite gone awry, not the unsettling silence that now lingered in the skies overhead. Even the birds seemed reluctant to break the quiet. Corporal Hayes, always restless, muttered as he swatted at insects. Feels like the forest holding its breath, Captain. Elena did not answer, but his words dug beneath her ribs. She too sensed it, the world waiting for something unseen. They reached a clearing where equipment registered nothing but static. Morales, quiet and meticulous, fiddled with the comms pack, his brow furrowed. No interference I can trace, he whispered. It's like the signal's just gone. Elena studied the canopy, its green expanse closing above them. A soldier trained to read battlefields, she felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing down. The unease was not born from imagination. Something had shifted, and she was walking straight into it. The first alien patrol came at dusk, descending in a shimmer of light that distorted the trees. They were tall, armored, and utterly confident. Their helmets pulsed with readings that reduced the forest to a transparent map of heat signatures and movements. They marched in a line that spoke of centuries of discipline, weapons gleaming in the last light of the sun. To them, it was not an incursion, but a walk through a wilderness they already owned. Elena froze her squad with a gesture, every muscle locked in silence. Through her scope, she studied the invaders. Their formation was loose, their rifles lowered, their posture careless. These were not men on guard. These were predators convinced no other hunter lurked here. Hayes nearly exhaled too loudly, but Elena's eyes cut him back into stillness. She forced herself to breathe slow, to think. She needed to know them, to learn the way they moved before committing to action. One of the aliens paused to study claw marks along a tree trunk, deep grooves left by a jaguar staking territory. Amused, he tapped the mark as though mocking it. He did not see the cat watching from above, golden eyes unblinking. When the jaguar leapt, it struck with feral strength, claws and teeth raking across armor. The alien staggered, swearing in a guttural tongue, and his companions roared with laughter as plasma fire reduced the beast to ash. Their amusement carried into the treeline. They thought it a triviality, proof that nothing here could harm them. When they turned back to rejoin formation, the soldier's body was gone. The earth had swallowed him without a sound. Elena's squad crouched deeper into the brush, their pulses racing. She had not moved, not yet, but someone else had acted. The jaguar had been a distraction, and a human silence had done the rest. She whispered, barely audible, "They think the cat took him. They didn't even check." Hayes looked at her with wide eyes. "Then who?" She cut him short. "Not who. What matters is what they didn't see. They aren't looking for us. They don't even believe we're capable. The realization chilled her and steeled her at once. That arrogance could be fatal. Reports of the disappearance reached Vakul within the hour. He dismissed them with a wave of his claw. Predatory fauna. Unremarkable. His officers exchanged glances, but none dared contradict him. The commander's mind was already on the next phase, mapping human settlements, disabling their crude power grids, dismantling infrastructure. The scouts, he believed, were performing nothing more than formalities. Still, a note of irritation tightened his voice. Double the patrols. Sweep the wild zones. Leave no corner unchecked. As more patrols vanished in the jungles, explanations grew thinner. Soldiers whispered of shadows moving faster than sensors could track, of weapons stripped from corpses and left in strange patterns, of silence swallowing screams before they could reach calms. To Vakul, such reports were cowardice dressed as superstition. To Elena, they were confirmation. Humanity could wound the invaders, not by matching their machines, but by using something older, patience, cunning, and the instincts inherited from 1,000 generations of survival. Her squad built their first traps with scavenged supplies, crude at first but effective. Pits covered in foliage, explosives wired to branches, paths rerouted with false trails. Each skirmish was a test, each retreat a lesson. The aliens had numbers and power, but they did not understand how to fight something they could not see. Every encounter revealed a crack in their armor, both literal and psychological. Elena pushed her squad harder, driving them to think like the jaguar, like the wolf, like the hunter who waits until the prey believes itself safe. At night, she lay awake listening to the distant hum of alien machinery, her rifle across her chest. She thought of the soldier who had vanished without a trace, of the jaguar's doomed leap, of the arrogance in Vakul's cold voice. The enemy believed Earth was a garden without predators. They would learn otherwise. She whispered into the dark, a vow spoken to herself as much as to the world. They came for prey. What they'll find are hunters. The jungle, heavy with mist, gave no reply, but she felt its silence as agreement, as though the planet itself waited for what would come next. The first attack came at dawn, swift and unannounced, more a message than a battle. Elena's squad had spent the night weaving traps along a narrow ravine where alien patrols had been sighted. They worked in silence, sweat clinging to their skin, every rustle of leaves amplifying the weight of what they planned. It was not courage that drove them, but inevitability. They could not run. They could not hide forever. Sooner or later, the aliens would discover humanity's will. Elena meant to control when that moment came. The squad waited in concealment as the alien soldiers entered the ravine. The enemy walked with mechanical confidence, rifles raised, but movements careless, convinced no danger could emerge from this place. They did not notice the subtle alterations in the terrain, the disturbed soil covering concealed pits, the carefully bent branches positioned as triggers. When the first detonation split the air, the patrol froze. A soldier vanished in a spray of mud as the ground collapsed beneath him, sharp stakes and fire swallowing his armored form. Chaos bloomed. Hayes fired the opening shot, a precise burst that struck a commander's exposed joint, toppling him before he could issue orders. The jungle erupted with echoes, rifle cracks, shouts, plasma bursts. But the humans did not stay to fight. Their plan was disruption, not annihilation. Every second of confusion counted. Elena signaled the retreat, and the squad melted back into the foliage, ghosts in the greenery. By the time the aliens regrouped, half their patrol was down, and their remaining soldiers were chasing shadows that no longer existed. When the squad returned to their makeshift camp, Hayes's grin betrayed both exhilaration and terror. "We did it, ma'am. Elena cut him off with a sharp hand. "We survived. That's all. Don't celebrate yet." Still, she could not ignore the spark in his eyes. It was the first time he looked less like prey and more like something dangerous. Far above, reports reached Vakul's command deck. His officers hesitated as they delivered the data, rising casualties, ambushes too precise to dismiss as accidents, and the unnerving pattern of weapons stripped from corpses. The commander's jaw clenched, though his voice remained cold. Isolated resistance. Primitive but desperate. Increased presence. Deploy drones. He refused to acknowledge the murmurs spreading among his troops. Stories of bipeds who moved unseen, of weapons snatched from the dead, of a jungle that had turned against them. Fear was spreading, and fear in soldiers could be fatal. Elena gathered her squad after nightfall, the glow of a small fire barely touching their faces. They ate in silence until she spoke. You saw how they reacted. They're not invincible, but they'll come harder now, and we have to be ready. This isn't about killing them all. It's about teaching them what they don't understand. She scanned their faces, pausing on Hayes, then on Private Morales, whose hands trembled as he adjusted his weapon. They think Earth has no predators. They don't see us for what we are. That's their weakness, and it's our chance. Morales swallowed hard. And what exactly are we, Captain? Elena's eyes hardened. Hunters. We hunt the hunters. The next days blurred into a cycle of ambush and retreat. The aliens advanced with heavier weapons, drones that scanned the treetops, armored vehicles that crushed undergrowth, but the humans adapted. They used decoys, misleading heat signatures, false trails carved into the soil. They learned the drones had blind spots, moments of recalibration. They learned the vehicles, though powerful, could be crippled by waterlogged terrain. Each encounter ended with alien casualties. Their technology turned into vulnerabilities by the ingenuity of a few determined soldiers. Yet every success came with cost. 2 men were lost when a plasma barrage tore through the trees faster than they could dive for cover. Their screams still lingered in Elena's ears long after the jungle returned to silence. She buried the bodies herself, hands shaking, jaw clenched. She wanted to rage, but her soldiers needed resolve, not grief. Hayes watched her with unspoken questions, but she refused to meet his eyes. Leadership demanded distance. In the alien command chamber, Vakol studied holographic displays littered with red markers where patrols had gone silent. He had underestimated. The humans were not merely resisting. They were dismantling his forces piece by piece. He addressed his officers with clipped fury. We are soldiers of the greatest armies the stars have ever seen, and yet we bleed to creatures armed with scraps of metal and instinct. Find them, crush them, show them the meaning of subjugation. But doubt had already wormed its way into his ranks. Some whispered that the humans were not prey at all, but predators more ruthless than any they had known. Elena felt the shift too. Her squad was no longer hiding in fear, but moving with purpose. Each strike carried weight, each decision drawn from survival, sharpened into instinct. She saw Hayes grow bolder, his confidence swelling dangerously close to recklessness. She saw Morales harden, his once shaking hands steady, his eyes darker than before. They were changing, molded by the hunt. Elena wondered whether the transformation was strength or something more troubling. One evening, as rain lashed the canopy, the squad executed their boldest raid yet. They had tracked an alien supply convoy moving through a riverbed. Timing was critical. The convoy carried not just weapons but communications relays, the lifeline of the invaders' coordination. With the storm masking their movements, Elena's squad descended. Explosives tore through the lead vehicle. In the chaos that followed, the humans struck with ferocity. Hayes' shots pierced through drone casings. Morales planted charges with steady hands. Elena herself drove her knife into the gap of an alien's armor, pulling him down into the mud. Within minutes, the convoy burned. The squad vanished back into the rain, leaving only smoke and shattered metal in their wake. The victory was decisive, but its aftermath was heavier than celebration. In the quiet that followed, Elena saw the exhaustion etched into her soldiers' faces. She knew they could not keep this pace forever. They were hunters now, yes, but hunters could bleed, and predators could tire. Still, the message had been sent. News of the convoy's destruction rippled through both sides of the conflict. To the humans scattered across the world, It became proof that resistance was possible. To the galactic armies, it was confirmation that something far more dangerous than expected lurked on Earth. Commander Vakol stared at the burning wreckage transmitted to his flagship, his reflection dark in the glass. For the first time, he did not speak of inevitability. He spoke of war, and in the jungle, Elena lay awake, rain dripping through the leaves above her, rifle across her chest. She thought of the jaguar's sudden leap, of the alien dragged into silence, of her squad striking with teeth bared. She whispered into the dark, as though daring the enemy to listen. "You came here thinking we were prey. Now you'll learn. We're the predators." The war no longer belonged to a single jungle. It spread across continents like a contagion. Every city, mountain, and coastline whispering the same truth. Humanity refused to be prey. Elena's squad, once a small knot of resistance, became a symbol passed along broken communication lines and whispered over radios running on dying batteries. Other groups rose in parallel, guided by the same instinct, striking at convoys, sabotaging supply caches, and vanishing before retribution could fall. The galactic armies, vast and disciplined, found themselves bleeding against an enemy they had dismissed as beneath notice. Elena moved her squad constantly, never sleeping in the same place twice. Each day tested her endurance. She read exhaustion in Morales' heavy steps and Hayes' restless energy, but she forced them onward. Rest was weakness. Stillness invited death. She carried the burden of their survival as heavily as a rifle. Yet with each ambush, she saw them sharpen further, shedding the remnants of soldiers waiting for orders and becoming hunters in their own right. She both admired and feared the transformation. The aliens responded with escalation. Massive walkers trampled through forests, their cannons stripping the trees down to scorched stumps. Drones swarmed in the skies, searching for heat signatures with merciless precision. But technology faltered before ingenuity. Farmers strung decoy fires across fields to lure drones into ambushes. Hunters in Siberia led walkers across frozen lakes that cracked beneath their weight. Guerrillas in deserts buried explosives beneath sandstorms. Humanity fought with the creativity of desperation, and everywhere the aliens pressed, the ground itself seemed to rise against them. Commander Vakol paced his command deck, claws clattering against metal as reports streamed in. His officers spoke of mounting casualties, of soldiers refusing to enter dense terrain, of whispers calling Earth cursed. He silenced them with fury, but the doubt lingered in their eyes. The commander stared at the blue planet below, no longer a jewel ripe for harvesting, but a labyrinth of unseen dangers. He had waged countless campaigns, conquered worlds bristling with defenses. Yet here, against a species wielding crude weapons and raw instinct, his armies faltered. Pride demanded explanation. He settled on one. The humans were aberrations, anomalies that had to be crushed before the infection of their resistance spread further. Elena understood his mindset, even without hearing his words. She had studied enough commanders to know the type. Arrogant, relentless, unwilling to admit error. She knew he would come harder now, not because his soldiers were failing, but because his pride demanded victory. She gathered her squad during a brief lull, the jungle around them heavy with mist. "They think we're aberrations," she said quietly, a mistake in their calculations. "Let's make them believe it." Hayes smirked, though his eyes betrayed weariness. Morales simply nodded, his silence carrying more weight than words. Their most daring strike came when they learned of an alien command post erected on a ridgeline overlooking a valley. The post was heavily guarded, bristling with defenses, but its position made it vulnerable. It relied on technology to protect it, not the instincts of those inside. Elena crafted the plan carefully, balancing audacity with precision. The squad moved under cover of storm clouds, scaling the ridge with ropes scavenged from abandoned outposts. Every step was deliberate, every breath measured. They reached the perimeter silently. Morales disabled sensors with tools improvised from salvaged circuits, his concentration unbroken despite the tension gnawing at him. Hayes planted charges along fuel lines, his grin tight but unwavering. Elena led the final push, slipping into the command structure itself. Inside, the alien officers stared at displays, utterly unaware that predators had entered their den. When the first explosion tore through the ridge, chaos erupted. Elena's squad struck fast, gunfire echoing, blades flashing in close quarters. Within minutes, the command post burned. Elena dragged a wounded alien officer from the wreckage, pinning him to the ground. His eyes, wide and trembling, betrayed something she had not seen before in their kind: fear. Through the translator, his words spilled in gasps. "You don't fight to survive. You fight to kill." Elena's voice was steady. "No, we fight to win." She left him alive, knowing the message would spread faster than any fire. Fear was a weapon sharper than bullets. When word of the raid reached Vakul, his fury boiled over. He slammed his clawed fist against the console, shattering the projection. His officers flinched but said nothing. Reports confirmed what he dreaded. Morale was collapsing. Soldiers refused to patrol without heavy escort. Some muttered about curses, about shadows in the jungle, about bipeds who hunted like spirits. Vakul issued a proclamation across the fleet. No more restraint, no more scouting. He would unleash overwhelming force to break the humans utterly. His pride demanded nothing less. Elena sensed the storm gathering long before it arrived. Drones thickened overhead, patrols doubled, artillery fire-scorched clearings indiscriminately. The aliens were preparing something larger, something final. She felt the weight of inevitability press against her chest, but she refused to yield. She told her squad, "They'll throw everything at us now. Let them. We've been waiting for this." Hayes laughed, a brittle edge in his voice. Morales said nothing, but his hand rested on his rifle like a vow. In the following days, battles raged across the world. In mountains, humans buried aliens beneath avalanches triggered by dynamite. In oceans, divers strapped explosives to the hulls of landing craft. In cities, resistance fighters turned sewers into killing grounds. Humanity revealed its true nature not as prey, not even as mere defenders, but as predators who had studied every rival, every beast, every war, and distilled those lessons into survival. For Elena's squad, the fight became personal when they intercepted transmissions confirming Vakul's direct involvement in the next offensive. The commander himself was descending to oversee the eradication of human resistance. Elena's blood ran cold at the thought, but beneath the fear simmered resolve. "He's coming," she told her squad, "and we'll be waiting." That night, as rain fell in sheets, she sat awake while the others slept. She thought of the jaguar leaping, of the alien officer's trembling eyes, of Hayes's reckless grin and Morales's hardened silence. They had become predators, but predators could still fall. She wondered if they had enough strength left to finish what they had started. She whispered into the storm, not to reassure herself, but to challenge the darkness. "Come then, on us, and see what hunters become when cornered." The jungle answered with silence, heavy and expectant, as though the earth itself held its breath for the coming clash. The sky burned with fire as the alien fleet descended, a storm of ships blotting out the stars. Commander Vakul's offensive had begun. He did not come with scouts or cautious patrols this time, but with the full weight of his fury. Legions of soldiers, machines of war, and firepower meant to erase resistance in one decisive strike. The jungle shuddered beneath the landing of colossal walkers, their footfalls cracking trees and shaking soil. To his soldiers, Vakul declared this the cleansing, the end of the myth of predators. To him, the humans were vermin, and he would drown them in fire. Elena watched from the ridge, the sky glowing red with engines and weapon fire. Her squad crouched at her side, faces drawn, eyes fixed on the armada, descending into their world. Hayes muttered, "That's not an army. That's annihilation." Morales adjusted his grip on his rifle, his silence heavy as ever. Elena's jaw set. She felt the weight of her choices pressing down harder than ever before. She had led them this far, turned survival into defiance, defiance into war. Now the final reckoning had arrived, and she knew there would be no retreat. "We've fought shadows and patrols," she said, her voice calm despite the thunder of engines overhead. "But tonight we fight the storm. They think their size gives them power, but storms can be broken. All we need is one crack, one fracture, and the whole weight of them will come crashing down." She looked at Hayes, then Morales. "We make the crack." The plan had been laid over sleepless nights. They could not defeat the entire army, but they could destroy its heart. Vakal himself had come planetside to oversee the offensive. If they broke him, if they shattered his command, the alien forces would falter. Fear was already in their ranks. Removing their commander would turn fear into collapse. The jungle would be their weapon. Every trap, every hidden cache of explosives, every choke point was prepared. They would not win by force, but by turning arrogance into downfall. The offensive began with a bombardment. Plasma fire streaked through the canopy, scorching swaths of forest into ash. Walkers advanced, their cannons tearing apart the undergrowth. Drones swarmed above like mechanical locusts. Yet as the army pressed deeper, the jungle closed around them. Explosions erupted from concealed pits, shrapnel tearing through armored columns. Trees toppled where charges had been set, crushing machines beneath tons of wood. Snipers struck from unseen vantage points, vanishing before retaliation could arrive. The aliens fought back with overwhelming force, but the battlefield belonged to Earth itself. Elena led her squad through the chaos, moving with purpose, their every step a thread in the web they had woven. Hayes darted ahead to trigger charges, his movements sharp and efficient despite the manic glint in his eyes. Morales carried the heavy pack of explosives, his endurance unwavering, every motion methodical. Elena kept them focused, her orders crisp, her rifle steady. They were not an army, but they were hunters guiding the hunt. Hours of battle blurred into fire and blood. Alien soldiers screamed through translators as shadows cut them down. Walkers collapsed into rivers, swallowed by detonations beneath their feet. Drones fell from the sky in flames. Still, the army pressed, but its rhythm faltered. For every advance, losses multiplied. The invaders expected prey, and instead they found an endless gauntlet of predators. At the heart of the offensive, Vakal pushed forward, his fury undimmed. He led from the front, his armor gleaming with authority, his weapon crackling with lethal energy. To his soldiers, his presence was meant to be unshakable proof of dominance. To Elena, it was the opening she had been waiting for. She signaled her squad, and they descended into the chaos surrounding the commander. The clash was brutal and close. Hayes hurled grenades into clustered soldiers, scattering them in fire. Morales laid charges along the path of the walkers, detonating them in a chain that carved a gap straight to Vakal's position. Elena moved like a shadow, every motion precise, every shot deliberate. The jungle itself seemed to conspire in their favor, smoke and rain masking their approach until only the commander remained between them and the heart of the enemy. Vakal roared, a sound both alien and furious, as he turned on Elena. Plasma fire tore through the trees, scorching the earth where she had stood seconds before. She rolled, rifle raised, firing bursts that glanced off his armor. He advanced with relentless strength, every step a promise of destruction. She met his fury with calm determination, weaving between roots and shadows, striking not with brute force, but with patience. The duel stretched on, predator against predator. Vakal struck with overwhelming power, his claws tearing bark from trees, his weapon searing the ground. Elena countered with cunning, forcing him into narrow terrain, baiting his charges into vulnerable positions. Each strike she landed chipped at his confidence. Each evasion turned his strength into frustration. At last, she found her moment. As he lunged, she triggered the charge Hayes had buried earlier, the explosion throwing him off balance, his armor cracked and smoking. She surged forward, wrenching his own weapon from his hands, and drove it into the gap at his chest. His roar cut short, his body collapsing into the mud with a final shudder. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of fire and the pounding of rain. Elena stood over the fallen commander, chest heaving, blood mingling with mud. Hayes staggered up beside her, his face pale, his grin hollow. Morales appeared moments later, eyes dark, shoulders heavy. They had done the impossible. The storm had a fracture. Across the battlefield, the alien soldiers faltered. Leaderless, their formations crumbled. Whispers spread like wildfire. Their commander was dead, their invincibility broken. Fear surged where discipline once held. One by one, units withdrew, retreating into the smoke, their ships lifting back into the sky. The great offensive collapsed, not with triumph, but with desperation, the galactic armies fleeing the world they had sought to dominate. As the sky cleared, Elena and her squad stood amid the wreckage, the jungle scarred but still alive around them. They were battered, bruised, and diminished, but they endured. Hayes let out a shaky laugh, more disbelief than joy. Morales simply sat in the mud, staring at the weapon in his hands as though it no longer belonged to him. Elena looked skyward, watching the fleeing ships vanish into the stars. She felt no triumph, only a quiet certainty. The war was not over, but the message was clear. She whispered into the silence, her words carried by rain and smoke. They thought Earth had no predators. Now they know. We are the predators. And though the jungle gave no reply, it seemed to breathe with her, as though the planet itself agreed.